The story began in a barren desert. A group of smugglers was searching for exotic creatures. One of them discovered a spider's nest under a pile of rocks. They pumped gas into the nest, trying to force the inhabitants out. A highly venomous spider darted out and bit one of the smugglers. The man convulsed in agony, his life quickly fading. His companion, to end his suffering and prevent the venom's spread, brutally killed him with a machete. The remaining smugglers collected the other spiders that swarmed from the nest into plastic containers ready for sale. And one of them, after passing through many hands, eventually ended up in France, purchased by a shoe seller named Caleb. Caleb's greatest hobby was keeping various reptiles, but all his glass boxes at home were already full, so he casually placed it inside a shoebox. However, when he left, he didn't notice the small hole at the bottom of the box. Before long, the venomous spider slowly crawled out through the hole. By the time he returned and discovered the situation, it was already too late. No matter how hard he searched the room, he couldn't find it. He only found a cocoon made of spider silk behind a photo frame. Seeing this, Caleb knew the room was no longer livable. He decided to sleep on the couch in the living room instead, and before leaving, he stuffed a towel in the door gap to prevent the spider from coming out. But what he didn't know was that the spider was now hiding inside one of the shoeboxes he was selling. When his neighbor Tumani returned home and put on his shoes, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his foot. He quickly took off the shoe to check, and a spider crawled straight out from it. Tumani reacted fast and smashed it instantly. But just as he was about to keep checking, a swarm of spider larvae poured out. Soon, his body was covered in pus, and he died from the venom. The next day, neighbors noticed the man's dog barking frantically, and no one answered the phone. Sensing something was wrong, they decided to break down the door. When they entered, they saw the horrific sight of Tumani's corpse. But after police investigation, no details were revealed. They simply told everyone to go home and wait, forbidding anyone to leave the building. The strange situation left the neighbors confused. Gila bluntly claimed that Tumani probably died from a drug overdose, and that the police were actually looking for a drug dealer hiding in the building. He suspected that person was Caleb, because he had seen Caleb and Tumani doing a secret exchange before. The malicious rumor made Caleb and his friend Matthys furious. The two sides immediately got into a heated fight, and it was only thanks to police intervention that things didn't escalate further. But when Caleb saw Tumani's body being taken away, missing one shoe, he had a sinking feeling that he himself might be deeply involved in this incident. On the other side, the cleaning lady was cleaning the restroom when she noticed a lot of fresh spider webs mysteriously appearing on the ceiling. She immediately went to grab 2 cans of insecticide. She had no idea that a spider had crawled through the vent window into the next room, which was already overrun with spiders. In fact, spiders had begun appearing in every corner of the apartment, but the residents still hadn't realized the danger. A girl named Lila found that the cover of the air vent had mysteriously fallen to the floor. When she put it back in place, she didn't know the duct inside was crawling with spiders. The next second, Lila was startled by a spider hiding in a towel. Thanks to her quick reaction, she avoided being bitten. She told her boyfriend Jordy to kill the spider right away. Since Jordy was also a reptile enthusiast, he grabbed a glass cup, intending to catch the big spider alive. Unfortunately, his technique wasn't great. Under Lila's impatient urging, Jordy had no choice but to stomp the spider to death. But when he lifted the towel, he was shocked by what he saw. Underneath it was a mass of tiny spiders. Afraid they would scatter, they decided to seal the bathroom door with tape. By this point, Caleb finally realized the culprit was probably the desert venomous spider he had bought earlier. The cocoon inside the shoebox had already hatched into many baby spiders. While the cleaning lady was tidying the hallway, she discovered the corpse of a spider. It was the largest one she had ever seen. Puzzled, she then noticed the police secretly locking the apartment's main door. Her instincts told her that something was definitely wrong. The large amount of spiderwebs she later found in the stairwell only confirmed her suspicion. When she lifted a ceiling panel, she sprayed insecticide frantically. To check if it worked, she leaned in with a headlamp, only to be attacked by a spider. Caleb and his friends discussed leaving the apartment as soon as possible, but before leaving, they felt they had to warn the other residents. Otherwise, their conscience wouldn't be at peace. When Caleb knocked on Musa's door, Musa was listening to music while working out. The music was so loud that he didn't hear the knocking. Just then, he caught sight of a huge spider crawling on the wall in the mirror. But in the blink of an eye, the spider disappeared. Musa began searching the entire room. In the process, he kicked the wall and made a large hole. Curious, he crawled closer to check, only to find the hole filled with spider webs. The next moment, a swarm of baby spiders attacked him from inside the wall. Meanwhile, his drunken father was passed out on the couch in the living room, completely unaware of his son's desperate screams. Caleb and Matthys knocked on many doors, but either the neighbors didn't take them seriously, or no one answered. They kicked open Claudia's door and found her sitting peacefully on the couch. When Caleb called her name, she didn't respond. As he got closer, he was horrified. Claudia was no longer breathing, and countless baby spiders were crawling out from beside her. When the two came out, they ran into an old man from next door asking for help. It seemed he had been bitten too. Matthis wanted to check on him, but Caleb stopped him. If the old man had been bitten, there was basically no saving him. The poor old man returned to his room, using bowls and cups to trap the spiders. The apartment was no longer a home for people, but a paradise for venomous spiders. Meanwhile, Jordy found some clues online. Female spiders could grow 10 times larger when laying eggs to fend off predators. Worse still, they could lay eggs inside humans or animals, and when the babies matured, they would crawl out of the body. Knowing this place was no longer safe, the group set out to escape together, but they soon realized the situation was worse than they thought. The door to the lobby on the first floor was completely blocked by thick spider webs, and to make matters worse, there was a deadly giant spider on top. Since this route was impossible, they headed for the parking garage, only to find an even worse scene. The passageway was crawling with spiders everywhere. Just when everyone was losing hope, Caleb made an observation. As long as the lights were on, the spiders' movement slowed down. The problem was, the lights in the passageway only lasted for 1 minute, and someone had to stay at the switch. At this critical moment, Caleb's sister, Manon, stepped forward. She told everyone to go first while she stayed behind to cover their retreat. The group carefully made their way through the passage. When Manon faced danger, she cleverly lit a lighter and turned the situation around. However, the door connecting to the garage had already been locked. Through a brief exchange, they realized the police were right on the other side. Caleb begged the officers to open the door and let them out, but they coldly refused. In desperation, they tried to force the door open, only to be shocked. Not only did the police refuse to help, but they also sprayed poisonous gas at them. With no choice, the group had to retreat the way they came. But without the protection of the lights, the danger doubled instantly. Jordy was quickly wrapped up in spider webs and swarmed by venomous spiders. His girlfriend, Lila, tried to rush in and save him, but it was too late. The others pulled her back immediately. They ducked into a maintenance room. There were no air vents here, so it hadn't yet been taken over by spiders. After witnessing Jordy's brutal death, Caleb completely broke down. Matthis, still keeping a clear head, suggested that since they couldn't get out, they should climb to the rooftop and use torches to signal people in nearby buildings for help. Fortunately, there were some gasoline cans and fireworks on the shelves, which could be used to fight off the spiders. There was no better option. Rather than waiting to die, they decided to take the risk. The group carefully headed for the stairwell, with Matthis carrying a burning torch in front. The spiders on the ceiling were enormous, so big that even the brave Matthis struggled to fight back his fear. He told Caleb to take out a homemade Molotov cocktail to clear the way, but the heat from the flames suddenly drove the spiders into a frenzy, and they swarmed toward the group all at once. Panicked, they scrambled up the stairs. The spiders climbed too fast and were about to catch up. At the last moment, they slipped into an empty apartment. Its owner had been the first in the building to notice the spiders, so he had sealed the entire place with plastic sheets in advance. Thinking about everything that had happened, Caleb was filled with regret. Then Lila noticed that they were on the 4th floor and could try climbing down from the window. While Matthis and Manon were tying plastic sheets together, several heavily armed police officers stormed in. Their intimidating presence made it clear they weren't here to save anyone. Unable to hold back his anger, Caleb rushed at the police, but he was overpowered and beaten until his head was bleeding before finally losing consciousness. When Caleb woke up, he was already in the parking garage with the police. The officers were dealing with piles of spider corpses. The lieutenant came over and told them that the situation was complicated. The poison gas didn't work on the spiders, and the remaining bullets were only enough for self-defense. At that moment, Caleb noticed something was wrong with Matthis. Looking closely, he saw a bite mark on Mathis's neck. Matthis knew he didn't have long to live, so he decided to sacrifice himself to give his friends a chance to escape. When the police weren't paying attention, he rammed the parking garage door open and disappeared into the darkness. Moments later, countless spiders poured in through the opening. The police concentrated their fire, but the casualties were still heavy. During the chaos, Caleb became separated from his sister, Manon. He told Lila to find her car and hide inside, then ran alone through the hail of gunfire to look for Manon. Although the siblings reunited safely, Caleb's leg was hit by a bullet. Manon smashed the window of a nearby car with a fire extinguisher and pulled Caleb inside. Outside the window, a massive spider glared at them. One of its claws had already reached through the broken glass. At the last second, blinding headlights forced the spider back. It was Lila. She hadn't abandoned her friends. Caleb and Manon quickly got into Lila's car. When they reached the exit, they found the garage door shut. Someone had to get out to open it manually. A giant spider blocked the way. Caleb calmly told Lila to turn off the headlights. In the darkness, the spider felt safe and moved aside, allowing Caleb to push open the exit. The three of them then drove out of the quarantine zone. Afterward, the authorities demolished the entire building. A wall of photographs honored the dead. Among them was Caleb's picture, implying the officials believed no one had survived. In the story, the swarm of spiders symbolized the residents abandoned by society. At first, they were only trying to survive, but because of fear and neglect from the outside world, they were treated as a threat. The police's inaction and brutality represented systemic discrimination.